From the quiet shores of the wise people of the water, where the rivers keep their secrets and the mountains stand guard. This is the High Strangeness Sleep Society, a gathering for sleepless dreamers, wanderers of the night and seekers of the strange. Here in the stillness of the late hours, we trace the lines between myth and memory, between the world you know and the one just beyond it. So settle in, breathe deep, and let the night unfold. Tonight we stay up late with a man who spent his whole life listening to the spaces between things, and with the strange idea he found waiting there. By the time the third witness called, John Keel had already decided there was probably a simple explanation. The first report had come from a school teacher. A bright object, she said, had hovered over a field outside town. The second came from a truck driver who had seen the same thing from 20 miles away. The two accounts did not match. They contradicted each other on several details that should not have been negotiable. Then the phone rang again. The woman on the line did not want her name used. She spoke quietly, the way people speak when they think someone else might be on the line. 2 nights earlier, she said, a man had knocked on her door. He wore a dark suit in the summer heat. He asked a short list of questions about lights in the sky, and then he left without ever saying who he was. That was interesting, but not remarkable. Keel had heard stranger things, and he had explained most of them. What made it remarkable was the file already sitting on his desk. Weeks before, another witness had described the same visit, a different neighborhood, a different man, the same short list of questions. Coincidences happen. Any investigator learns that early, and Keel had been at this longer than most. He was a working journalist, radio, television, magazine work, a man who had filed stories from Paris and Berlin and Cairo and come home unimpressed by most of what frightened other people. Flying saucers were just another assignment, approached the way a reporter approaches a city council scandal. He expected to find something ordinary wearing an extraordinary costume. The deeper he dug, the less the reports behaved like coincidence. Names repeated, telephone numbers turned up in places they had no reason to be. People who had never met furnished the same small details, unprompted. It was as if some invisible hand had reached into a drawer of unrelated events and shuffled them into a pattern. The object in the sky began to interest him less than the web spreading out from it. He kept returning to one idea in his notes. The witnesses were real, the fear was real. And underneath all of it, something seemed to be moving, quietly, deliberately, just past the edge of what any of them could quite perceive, leaving only fragments behind for him to find. To understand where Keel went next, set the strangeness aside for a moment and stand in something solid. A physics classroom. Think of visible light. Every color the eye can hold. Red at one end, violet at the other, the whole rainbow in between. For most of us, that band of color is simply the world. It is everything we can see, and so it feels like everything there is. It is a sliver. Past the red, where vision quietly stops, the spectrum keeps going, into infrared, into microwaves, into the long, slow roll of radio waves. Past the violet, it runs the other way, into ultraviolet, into X-rays, into gamma. All of it is real. All of it is in the room with you right now, passing through the walls, through the lamp, through your own body, in perfect silence. None of it reaches your eyes. The instrument was never built to receive it. Other animals were built to different specifications. A honeybee sees ultraviolet and reads patterns on a flower that are, to us, a blank petal. A rattlesnake sees the heat of a mouse in full darkness. A dog hears a whistle that makes no sound at all to the man blowing it. A migrating bird feels the magnetic field of the planet and steers by it through the night. None of these creatures are imagining things. They are tuned to a station we cannot pick up. So most of reality, even the part we can measure, is already invisible to us. We live inside one thin colored stripe and call it the whole of things. And the unseen part of the spectrum was here long before anyone knew to look for it. Radio waves crossed the sky over every person who ever lived, over the pharaohs, over the cave painters, over your own great-grandparents, and not one of them could tell. The waves were not proven to exist until 1887 in a laboratory in Germany by a physicist named Heinrich Hertz. They had been there the whole time. We had no instrument and no reason to go looking. Keel had spent his early career inside radio stations, and the radio gave him the image that organized everything after. A radio does not make music. The signal is already in the room, already in the air, whether the set is on or off. The radio only tunes. It finds one frequency in all that silent traffic and pulls it into sound. Move the dial and the station is gone. Not gone from the world, gone from your receiver. Think of the band a radio moves across. Turn the dial slowly and the stations stack up, one after another, each one whole, each one playing whether or not a soul is listening. The news, a hymn, a voice in a language you do not know, all of it riding the same air in the same room in the same instant. Your ear takes in none of it. Only the receiver does, and only one station at a time. The rest does not stop existing because you have tuned past it. It waits, at its own number, for someone set to the right frequency. He had loved stage magic as a boy. He knew exactly how a man on a stage makes you watch the wrong hand. And somewhere in those years he began to wonder whether the human race had been in some quiet way tuned to the wrong channel its entire history. That was the thought Keel could not put down. If the eye takes in a sliver and the ear takes in less, then the world we move through is not the world. It is a narrow report of the world, trimmed down to the few frequencies a human body happens to carry instruments for. Everything else is still there. We have simply agreed, all of us, to call the keyhole the door. What else, he asked, is broadcasting in this room that we simply have no dial for? In 1975, in a book called The Eighth Tower, Keel gave the idea a name. He proposed that beyond the spectrum we know, beyond radio, beyond gamma, beyond anything our senses can reach, there is more. A further range of energy, a spectrum lying past the spectrum. He called it the Superspectrum. And he did not think it was empty. He believed something lived there. Not visitors passing through, but residents, an intelligence native to a band of reality that human beings were simply never equipped to sense. Not hiding from us exactly, broadcasting all along on a frequency our bodies cannot receive. He did not mean ghosts exactly. He did not mean machines either. What he meant was something between the two and older than both. A form of life made of energy rather than matter, native to the place just past our perception, and here for as long as the earth has held anything that could look up and wonder. We were not being visited. we were being shared with. Set that beside the last 100 years of searching. We have aimed telescopes outward and antennas outward, asking always the same question. Which planet? How far? How fast? Keel's answer turns the whole search around. We had been looking out, across all that empty distance, for something that was never out there. It was here all along, one turn of the dial away. One consequence followed, and Keel did not flinch from it. If the others live at a frequency we cannot reach, then we do not find them. They find us. We cannot travel to the superspectrum, cannot aim a rocket at it, cannot answer it with radio. The whole traffic runs one way. They cross down to us when they choose, in the shape they choose, and they withdraw when they are finished. We are not the explorers in this story. We are the ones who get visited. He was not saying the aliens were real after all. He was saying the word itself was wrong, that spacecraft were only what our own century happened to believe in. The intuition was not even new. Long before there was a word like spectrum, people spoke of an unseen world laid over this one, a country of spirits and small gods and the recently dead, close enough to touch and impossible to find. Keel was not inventing that idea. He was setting it in a new language, carrying it out of religion and into physics. The old curtain had simply been given a new name. Keel came to suspect the objects in the sky were not machines at all. Not metal, not rivets, not hulls. Something closer to living energy, able to move into the visible spectrum and back out of it, the way a thought moves into speech and then falls quiet again. It changes what a sighting is. A light does not arrive over the field. It surfaces the way a shape rises out of deep water into the thin, bright layer near the top, hangs there a moment where eyes can reach it, and then sinks back down into the dark below. The witnesses on the ground say it shot away at an impossible speed. To Keel, it did not go anywhere at all. It slipped back beneath the surface of the spectrum, where their eyes could no longer follow. It also explains the way the objects act once they are here. Witnesses watch a single light split cleanly in two and the halves move off in different directions. They watch two lights drift together and become one. The things pulse. They change color through the whole spectrum, red to white to blue, the way heated metal does. And often they seem to know they are being watched, easing closer to a car that slows, lifting away from one that speeds, holding just at the edge of the headlights. None of that is how aircraft behave. All of it is how energy behaves. There is also what the energy does to the machines we build. On the night of November 2nd, 1957, outside Levelland, Texas, a farm worker named Pedro Saucedo watched a blue-white object the shape of an egg drop toward his truck. The engine died. The headlights went black. When the object lifted away, the truck started again on its own, as though nothing had happened. Over the next few hours, a college student, the county sheriff, and the town fire chief described the same thing on different roads, engines failing as the light came near and catching again the moment it left. The Air Force called it ball lightning and closed the file in a week. A great deal of the impossible softens under that single idea. The instant vanishings, the turns no aircraft could survive, the radar contacts that blink out between one sweep and the next. None of it was ever metal or air. It was never landing, it was surfacing and going back under. And then, almost always, it leaves nothing worth keeping. A scorched ring in a field that fades by spring. A watch that runs a few minutes fast. A patch of ground where the snow would not settle. The witness is left with a story no one can confirm, and no one can quite take away. Whatever surfaced has gone back under, and it takes the proof with it, a few fragments, and the certainty of the person who stood there. And the surfacing does not happen evenly across the map. It pools. A particular valley, a particular stretch of road, a particular small town that, for reasons no one can name, fills a filing cabinet with sightings while the next town over stays quiet for a generation. Keel called these places window areas. In a few thin spots on the earth, the signal seems to come through clearer. The curtain between the spectrums hangs a little looser, and whatever lives on the far side of it does not have to try as hard to be seen. People who grow up in those places tend to already know. They learn which road not to take after dark. They are rarely surprised. The places themselves tend to share a few features. Water, often, a river, a reservoir, a long stretch of coast. High ground or old hills worn down almost to nothing. Sometimes a fault in the rock beneath. The sightings in a place like that do not come once and stop. They come to the grandparents, and then the parents, and then the children, the same lights over the same field, until the strangeness is just another part of the local weather. People move away, the window stays where it is. In our own time, the visitor is a small gray figure. There is missing time. There is an examination, a table, a cold and clinical interest in the body. It arrives often in the bedroom, late, with the witness unable to move. The shape everyone pictures has a birthday. On the 24th of June, 1947, a pilot named Kenneth Arnold saw 9 objects flash past Mount Rainier. He told a reporter they moved like a saucer skipped across water. He was describing the motion, not the shape. The reporter printed the words, "Flying saucer." Within weeks, people across the country were seeing saucers in the sky. Not lights, not wings, but saucers. The phenomenon had been handed a costume by a misprint, and it put it on at once. Go back to the closing years of the 19th century. In the winter of 1896 and the spring of 1897, thousands of Americans watched a great airship cross the country, a long cigar-shaped craft with brilliant searchlights drifting over towns from California to the Midwest. This was years before powered flight. In Aurora, Texas, people claimed one of the ships struck a windmill and fell. They said a body, not of this world, was pulled from the wreck and buried in the local cemetery. The flying saucer had arrived half a century early, wearing the most advanced machine the Victorian imagination could supply. Further back, past the machines entirely, lies the fairy faith of old Europe. People taken into a hill or a ring or a lighted hall, returning to find that years had passed in a single night. Infants lifted from their cribs and a changeling left in their place. Travelers struck motionless on a dark road, dazzled, marked, sometimes never quite the same. In 1969, a researcher named Jacques Vallée laid these old accounts beside the modern ones in a book called Passport to Magonia. The missing time, the interest in human reproduction, the paralysis. The abduction story, told whole, centuries before anyone had heard the word. The name Vallée borrowed was older than he was by 1,000 years. Around the year 815, the Archbishop of Lyon, a man named Agobard wrote down a story in order to mock it. A crowd in his city had seized 4 strangers, 3 men and a woman, who they swore had climbed down from ships in the clouds, sailors from a sky country called Magonia, come to steal the harvest. The crowd was ready to stone them. Agobard talked the people down, certain the whole thing was a peasant delusion. He wrote it out only to dismiss it. 12 centuries later, it is one of the things we still have. Go back as far as the records go, and you find wheels of fire in the sky, and shining messengers, and beings of light who deliver instructions and vanish. Keel drew the conclusion, the pattern forces. The encounter never changes, only the costume, updated to whatever the witness is prepared to believe. An airship for the age of machines, a spacecraft for the age of space. And the detail he kept circling, the technology in the story is always just slightly ahead of the people who see it, and never further than that. Real machines do not arrive that way. A mirror does. If the lights are energy that crosses over, then so are the figures inside them. Keel gave them a word. Not extraterrestrial, ultra-terrestrial. Not from beyond the earth, but beyond the terrestrial. Here, now, sharing the world with us, riding a band of reality we cannot tune to. They are not flesh in his account, and they keep no single body. They choose a form each time to suit the person in front of them. The actor selects a costume for the audience in the room. In his own writing, Keel put it without much decoration. From time to time, he said, the playful inhabitants of the other world climb through the curtain in the areas we call windows, and they create all kinds of mischievous beliefs and misconceptions in our feeble little terrestrial minds. He did not think they were angels, and he did not think they were quite devils. The place he landed was colder and stranger than either. He called them tricksters, cosmic pranksters in his phrase, here to play simple-minded games with simple-minded humans. The boy who learned how a magician misdirects a room had grown into a man who believed the misdirection was running on every room at once and always had been. We watch the costume. We never once look at the actor. It would be easier if this were only a puzzle. It was not, and the people closest to it paid for the distance they closed. The witnesses Keel followed did not always come through it whole. Some were handed prophecies and missions and dates that arrived and passed with nothing behind them. A few built their lives around messages that led nowhere, and the lives did not hold. The dark-suited men turned up at the worst moments, asking their flat questions, muddying the trail, discouraging the curious. Keel stopped thinking of them as a government. He started thinking of them as the phenomenon, covering its own tracks. Those men became a mystery of their own. Keel gathered the descriptions, and they rarely varied. The suits were black and slightly wrong, too new or a size off. The skin was strangely smooth, the eyes kept behind dark glasses, indoors, at night. The cars were clean black models no dealer seemed to carry. The visitors asked their questions in a clipped, rehearsed way, knew things about the witness they had no ordinary way of knowing, and then were gone, untraceable. Keel gave them the name that stuck, the Men in Black. Then it came for him. In his apartment in Manhattan, the telephone began to ring at strange hours. Voices that were almost voices in the wrong rhythm, saying things they should not have known. Predictions delivered down the line that came partly true and then curdled. The sense growing slowly of being watched, of being handled, of having become a character in someone else's experiment rather than the man writing it down. The line between watching the story and standing inside it grew thin, and then it was gone. There were appointments he had not made, letters that answered questions he had only thought to ask, coincidences arriving faster than chance should allow until the word coincidence wore out. He had built a career on the faith that any strange thing, given enough patience, would come apart into something ordinary. The patience held. The ordinary answer never arrived. He had set out as the reporter at the back of the room, certain there was a simple explanation. Somewhere in those years the room turned around, and the story he was chasing began, quietly, to chase him back. He never fully climbed back out, and he came to suspect something worse than danger. If the thing feeds on belief and on confusion, then the simple act of paying attention to it, investigating it, writing it down, telling you about it now, may be exactly the kind of attention it was always trying to attract. Here is what the idea does once you let it in. It does not stay with the lights. It reaches out, quietly, and gathers up the rest. The figure at the foot of the bed at 3 a.m, the shape at the tree line, the voice on a telephone line that should have been dead, the vision in the church, the cold patch on the stairs. Keel had opened separate drawers for separate mysteries, the way we all do. One by one he closed them. A demon to one century, a hag pressing down on the sleeper's chest to another, one of the fair folk come to carry someone off to another still, a small gray figure with a needle to ours. The same visit wearing a new face for each new age. One origin, one face behind all the masks. Broadcasting from just past the edge of what we can perceive and choosing each time the one shape we are prepared to see. The visitor has been coming for as long as there have been people to visit. Your grandparents had a name for it, so did theirs and theirs before them. You are not the first to lie awake in the small hours and turn it over. You will not be the last. If he was right, then nothing you have ever been afraid of in the dark was ever a separate thing. So leave the dial where it is, between the stations, in that soft wash of static. Keel believed the static was never empty, that the silence was only a frequency we were never given, that something has been there the whole time, and that some nights, very quietly, it stops at the foot of the bed. You do not have to decide tonight. No one ever has. So we return to the quiet shores of the wise people of the water, where the rivers keep their secrets and the mountains stand guard. We trace the line for a little while between the world you know and the one just beyond it. Rest now. The night will keep watch.